Investors love to compare their profession to a detective's. You got to search for the right idea, you got to dig through all the clues, and you want just the facts, ma'am. In a world of people looking out for their own interest, you got to dig to protect yours. Nerdier investors will compare their efforts to a journalist's. You're finding the publicly available information, connecting the dots, and getting the story out that will change the world. Or at least your portfolio. And it's true. There is a lot of research that goes into investing. There's some digging, and then there's the logical piece, putting all the clues together to see where they lead. We've talked about what information we want to find: the company's business model, its financials, its valuation, how it stacks up to peers, and so on. Now we're going to talk about where to find it. You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes, and you don't need to be Lois Lane. You just have to have an idea of where to look. Every publicly traded company on the main exchanges is required to file a quarterly report, a 10Q, or an annual report, a 10K. They're required to file them X number of days after the end of a quarter, and you can usually expect to see them either when the company reports earnings or within a week or so after the earnings report. There are a few reasons I prefer to start my financial research in most cases with the 10Qs and the 10Ks. First, because they're the purest form of financial information. While in other filings, companies can contort the numbers a little bit in a legal but noisy way, and on financial websites, the companies that are inputting the information from the publicly traded companies, they have to fit them into boxes, and that too requires adjustments and minor changes that I don't have control over. The 10Qs and the 10Ks are more regimented. The 10Ks are audited, while the 10Qs have to fit certain formats. That makes them more consistent, easier to use, and easier to make comparisons with. The 10Qs and the 10Ks will also include some color, some information on how things are going, why the numbers are the way they are. On the flip side, it should be said, these forms can be quite dry and quite dense. It can be fairly intimidating to open a document that is more than 100 pages and try to take any information out of it. And because these are vetted by lawyers and written by people who work in corporations, they are professionally appropriate and thorough, or in other words, they make for good bedtime reading for insomniacs. All that said, the annual reports and the quarterly reports don't contain everything you need to know about a company, but they contain a lot. And so I find that they're the best place to really base my research in a company on. My favorite place to look for filings is just Edgar, the governmental website that hosts the filings, the electronic data gathering, analysis, and retrieval site. If you just Google Edgar, it should be the first or second result that you'll find. If for whatever reason you don't, you can go to the second, or you can add filings to the search. When you click on that, it depends where we lead you, but you may have to then go to search for company filings, and then you may have to click again on company or fund name, ticker symbol, and so on. Few steps, but that gets you to here. And then if I want to search a company, we're going to use Airbnb today. You can enter their ticker symbol or the company name. You can just click enter if you get the ticker symbol right, or you can click. And then we're looking for 10Qs and 10Ks, and you'll see those conveniently sorted out for us right here. 10K, 10Q. That may seem like a lot of steps. There are other places that can streamline the searching for filings process. Most of them, as far as I'm aware of, cost money. Seeking Alpha is one, though I'm not crazy with the UX, but they have the filings if you need them. BAMSEC is the name I know the best as something that offers a comprehensive filings tool, but it's fairly expensive. Koifin offers a comprehensive research tool, and it includes filings. Again, not so cheap. And then if you go from company basis to their investor relations website, that company will usually host their important filings there, but you have to go company to company. Personally, I think Edgar is fine. You can bookmark the company search page, just start there, and then enter your ticker symbol or your company name, and you go right into it. It's not going to be amazing. It's a government website. The user experience is not going to be the slickest in the world, but it's sufficient. I think it's easy to get used to, and it gets you all the information you need, also for free. Okay, let's get into the meat of things. Like I said, we're using Airbnb, looking at their 10K, and then later I will explain how the 10Q differs. Looking at Airbnb's 10K from last year, we start with item 1, the business. The business will give us their business model, their basic challenges, their growth strategy, their competition, and the overall sense of what they're trying to do. You should be able to ask some questions about how they're doing or what challenges they might have after reading this. You should have a lay of the initial land. After item 1, we have the risk factors. The risk factors are an ass covering process. Companies want to be thorough. They want to cover every possible risk so that they don't get sued if their stock drops 15% for a reason that they didn't include here. That's the idea of the risks. That doesn't mean they're not useful. The risks are going to be a little bit dry, first of all, very legalese, and they're going to be exhaustive. But as you look over it, you'll see that the risks are highlighted in bold, and then they'll have paragraphs explaining it. And sometimes you'll come on really interesting risks. Some of the risks will be pro forma, sort of standard, generic, or outdated. But some of these risks will indeed highlight issues that you should care about. I don't spend a ton of time on the risks, but I do try to scan them for any company that I look at to see if there's anything surprising that I wouldn't expect. It's also good to review several 10Ks over time, and if you can catch how risks change over time, that can be informative as well. Going from there, we skip down to item 5. Item 5 isn't a major item, but it'll tell us a couple things. First of all, it'll tell us if the company bought back any shares in the prior quarter and what price they paid for those shares, which can be interesting. But then it'll give us a stock performance graph. Now, stock performance doesn't in and of itself mean anything. At the same time, we're exploring a company because we think there's an opportunity. It can be interesting to see its performance just as it is, to see how it's doing, but also to see who it compares itself to. In this case, I don't find Airbnb's comparison to the S&P 500 Informational Technology Index super useful, basically comparing themselves to tech companies. But in smaller companies' cases especially, this can be valuable. You can see their peer group, a broader index, and how they're doing over the last 5 years. Airbnb's only been public for 2 or 3. Going from there, we have item 7, management's discussion and analysis of financial condition. This is where they give color. It's dry, it'll have some boilerplate in it, but this is where they'll actually explain some of their numbers more. They'll go into a line by line breakdown of, for example, how they define cost of revenue, which is their gross cost, and then why did it go up or down this year? Why did operations support go up or down this year? It's not a ton of information, but it can give you a lot more specific information. They will often break out their segments. How did they do in the US versus other markets, or North America versus other markets? They will often give, if I go back up, so here's the by region, they will often give metrics that are not financial metrics, but that are important. How many nights and experiences booked? Gross booking value. Important numbers for travel companies like Airbnb that they're breaking out. They'll give you a reconciliation of their adjusted numbers, numbers that are not classic general accounting numbers, how they connect to the real numbers. This can be important as well as you get better at understanding these. So this section will give us more of the details on what's happening. It will be a little dry. I usually don't come to this section right away. There's other places to get color, but I will often come here if I have a specific question. Why did gross margin jump last year? Or how did Airbnb do in North America? That's when I'll come to this section and try to understand it. Our next section is the one with the most meat. We're getting to item 8, which is the financial statements. This is the central part of the annual report and the quarterly report. Sometimes it'll be all the way at the bottom of the annual report, but it's towards the end. It's when you see the full page tables of numbers. These are the financials. They're usually in order, either income statement, which is the consolidated statement of operations, balance sheet, consolidated balance sheets, and then cash flow statement, the consolidated cash flow statement. Sometimes they will put balance sheets first, as in Airbnb's case. Sometimes they'll put income statement first. There will usually be two smaller statements that are not as important right now to us before the cash flow statement comes. But we're going to go through how to actually break these down, but you just need to know that these are here for now. This is where the real information is. This is what not all of the financial or the investing decisions based on, but it's a big, important piece of the puzzle. The last stop that we're going to make on the annual report is the notes. This comes after the financial statements. There are notes that explain the financial statements. Think of this as a continuation of items 7 and 8, sort of a combination. It gives us any color that we didn't get in item 7. It might explain to us, for example, what is Airbnb's debt situation? What are they doing with their cash on the balance sheet now that interest rates are higher? And if we go down to note number 4, we will get their investments. And if we go down to note number 9, we will get their debt. So you don't need to spend a ton of time on here now. I didn't as a beginner, but it's good to know that these are here. One thing that I skipped that we do need to remember is that we can get the share count by going to the top of either the 10Q or the 10K. The share count is what will help us define the valuation for the current moment by multiplying the shares outstanding by the price. That'll be available at the top of either of these forms. And then as we go to the 10Q, the difference between the 10Q and the 10K is the 10Q is more abbreviated, not surprisingly. It's covering 1 to 3 quarters instead of a whole year. So that means it'll have less time covered, but also the format isn't as arduous. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not audited the way that the annual results are. What we'll see here, usually the financial statements will be right up front, so you don't have to scroll as far down for them. You will have the notes, which will be more or less in the same detail as previously. Sometimes companies will abbreviate the notes, but they're still usually here. And then after the notes, you will get the MD&A, what was item 7 on the annual report. Here it's item 2. And it'll be in the same format as on the annual report. And that's basically all that's fundamentally useful in the 10Q. All things equal, you should be trying to read everything, but we know that time is limited. When I'm researching a company, I'll usually go to the most recent 10Q to help me put together the full story, combining it with the 10K on how the business is doing, what the current valuation is, and what the latest trend is. Did the company grow in the last quarter as compared to the prior year, and so on. After that, I'm going to spend more of my time in the 10K. That gives me the more global picture, gives me more of the understanding of what the business is and how it's doing. I'll only dive back into the 10Qs if I have a specific question that I want to clarify. If there's something that happened in the second quarter of last year that I'm really curious about, maybe the 10Q will have more information than I can find in the annual report. There are a few other filings that are worth noting. We'll get to them in another video. But next, what we're going to do, in case all of this seemed too dense for you, we're going to go to a more user-friendly format for earnings reports. That is for the good and for the ill. We'll discuss why in the next video. Subscribe to this channel. Check out shortinvestingguide.com for more information, more links related to this article or to this video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time for our discussion of earnings reports and presentation.